The National Desk, America's News Now.
The pick is in.
I am so excited today. 1 month ago, it looked like Democrats were going to lose in a landslide. Turn up the clock to now, and it is extraordinary what is going on.
Kamala Harris selects Governor Tim Walz after days of speculation. Tonight, what we're learning about the last unknown candidate in the tightening race for the White House. Then, Tropical Storm Debby continues to batter and soak the Southeast. Why the worst of the storm isn't behind us just yet. Plus, Wall Street woes, how the markets are responding one day after the worst trading day in 2 years, and what the Fed may be forced to do about it. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. After days of anticipation, Decision 2024 officially taking shape on the Democratic side. America being introduced to Kamala Harris's chosen running mate, announced just this morning, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. The pair appearing together for the first time in Philly, where they're kicking off a campaign tour. VP Harris addressing the crowd right now. So let's listen in.
To be here with your incredible governor, Josh Shapiro. And I will say, Josh is a dear, dear friend and an extraordinary leader. He and I have been spending a lot of time together over the years. And I told Josh, look, I am so invested in our friendship in doing this together, because together with Josh Shapiro, we will win Pennsylvania. We will win Pennsylvania. And I thank you, Josh. I thank you. So Philadelphia, I launched my campaign for the President of the United States a mere 2 weeks ago. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind. And just last night, the delegates to the Democratic National Convention finished voting. And so I stand before you today to proudly announce I am now officially the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And so now we got some work to do. We need to move to the general election and win that. And to all the friends, listen, we also need to level set. We are the underdogs in this race. But we have the momentum, and I know exactly what we are up against. Now, many of you know, before I was elected vice president or elected a United States senator, I was an elected attorney general, and before that, elected district attorney.
And that was Vice President Kamala Harris addressing Philadelphia with her running mate, announced today Governor Tim Walz. Today's rally kicking off a 7-state campaign tour to battleground states across this country. Democratic voters looking to learn more about the new presumptive Democratic VP nominee that, until becoming a final contender, many Americans hadn't heard of, according to an NPR Marist poll. That poll finding nearly 3/4 of respondents didn't know enough about Walz to have an opinion on him. So who is Governor Tim Walz? Our Atra El-Nashar digging in.
Governor Walz's entrance into this race is yet another way the dynamics of this election have rapidly transformed since President Biden stepped down from the Democratic ticket. Now, Walz started out as something of an underdog in this Veep stakes, but he quickly emerged as an effective, relatable messenger at a time when the Democratic Party desperately needed one.
These are weird people on the other side. They want to take books away. They want to be in your exam room. That's what it comes down to. And don't, get sugarcoating this. These are weird ideas.
From a high school teacher to congressman to two-term governor, Minnesota's Tim Walz now hopes his Midwestern credibility and progressive record helps deliver Democrats a victory in November. Walz is popular in his home state with a 54% approval rating. Minnesotans cheering him on as he left his home in a motorcade Tuesday morning. But nationally, people don't know much about Walz. In a new NPR PBS News Marist poll, 71% of Americans have never heard of him or are unsure how to rate him. A 60-year-old father of two, Army National Guard veteran and gun owner, Walz was an early supporter of same-sex marriage. As governor, established universal free school meals and middle-class tax cuts. And in recent weeks, led a rebrand of how Democrats go after former President Donald Trump.
How often in the world do you make that wake up afterwards and know that a black woman kicked his and sent him on the road?
Republicans quick to label Walz as a radical progressive, saying he'll launch hell on earth.
Tim Walz will be a rubber stamp for Kamala's dangerously liberal agenda.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level.
In the end, Harris narrowed down her list of potential running mates to Walz and the governor here in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. But there were concerns among pro-Palestinian progressives about Shapiro's strict support for Israel, not to mention his murky record on labor issues. Shapiro put out a statement calling Walz an exceptional choice and says he'll still travel the state for these next 90 days campaigning for Harris. In Philadelphia, I'm Atrell Nishar.
Atra, thank you. Right now, Debby continues her downpour. We continue to track the tropical storm as it stalls right over Georgia and continues moving up the coast to South Carolina, where it's expected to usher in historic levels of rainfall. Right now, Debby is moving at less than 10 miles per hour and could dump 25 inches of rain, causing catastrophic flooding to low-lying areas. The National Hurricane Center says there is more than a 70% chance of flash flood risk. You can see it right there in that magenta color from parts of Georgia all the way to Raleigh, North Carolina over the next 5 days. Charleston's mayor now urging residents not to leave their homes as Debby remains a real threat.
The reality is that nobody should be out on the streets in these conditions unless it is an absolute emergency. Bottom line is we need you to stay home until this passes. The curfew is working.
Meanwhile, in Florida, the death toll from Debby has risen to at least 5. A 13-year-old boy was killed by a fallen tree, while at least 2 others died in an SUV crash. Meantime, power outages are still widespread in northern Florida. Several counties still have near total blackouts as more than 77,000 customers still have no electricity at the moment. Authorities are warning residents to ventilate their homes as best as they can to avoid carbon monoxide poisoning. In the western Caribbean Sea, the National Hurricane Center now watching Disturbance 1 as it makes its way toward the Gulf of Mexico. As of right now, there is just a 10% chance of developing into a tropical storm in the next 48 hours, with a 30% chance within the next 7 days. Recreational marijuana is now legal in Ohio. 98 shops in the state have been given approval by the Division of Cannabis Control to begin sales today. Medical marijuana dispensaries can also begin selling without a proper prescription. Ohio joins 23 other states in fully legalizing cannabis. A 5th inmate at the maximum security Waupun Correctional Facility in Wisconsin has died. This as the former warden, Randall Hepp, was in court today on charges of felony misconduct connected to the deaths of 2 inmates. 8 other members of prison staff have been charged with misconduct or abuse in this year alone. Reports of the latest death, 57-year-old Christopher McDonald, who has been in prison since 1993, suggest it was a suicide. And developing right now, what's next for tech giant Google after a judge said the company violated antitrust laws? The National Desk's Christine Frizzau has more on why experts in the field say this one could be a turning point for big tech.
Is Google a monopoly? For years, the Department of Justice has said yes. A federal judge now agrees, ruling in one of the biggest antitrust lawsuits in a generation that Google has unlawfully used distribution agreements to thwart competition and maintain its monopoly in the market for general search services and in various online advertising markets.
Monopolies threaten the free and fair markets upon which our economy is based. They stifle innovation, they hurt producers and workers, and they increase costs for consumers.
This case focused on Google's search dominance, which the government said it maintained by paying companies like Apple and Samsung tens of billions of dollars to be the default search engine on internet browsers and mobile devices.
The accusation, and now the finding, is that Google has deliberately, in order to shore up its monopoly, made it so that no other search engines can get the kind of scale they would need to be real competitors to Google.
In other words, the more you use Google, the more data it collects on you and what you're likely to click on, which means it will provide the best recommendations. The result? Google now controls roughly 90% of the world's internet searches. A defiant Google promising to appeal the ruling, writing in a statement, "This decision recognizes that Google offers the best search engine, but concludes that we shouldn't be allowed to make it easily available." With other lawsuits against Google, Meta, Amazon, and Apple already underway, some experts say this one may be the turning point.
It sets up a number of possibilities ultimately for the Supreme Court to weigh in and decide what its modern views about monopolization, dominant firm behavior are.
As far as the consequences for Google, they're likely to be laid out in a separate decision that could be months or even years away. I'm Christine Frizzau for the National Desk.
All right, Christine, thank you. And coming up, the day after disaster, how the markets responded to the worst day in 2+ years. And the world watches and waits as Iran is yet to pull the trigger on a massive military response, what the administration is doing to lower the temperature in the Mideast. Plus, chaos on an airplane inside the arrest of a passenger gone wild. Stay with us. We're back in just 90 seconds. We are tracking a series of storms from Dayton, Ohio, on east to Rhode Island that are bringing through Real severe weather for the folks living in those areas. These systems include severe thunderstorms capable of damaging winds, hail, and isolated tornadoes. Watches will continue for most of the evening. In terms of wildfires, the Park Fire in Northern California, it has grown to more than 414,000 acres. According to CAL FIRE, it's only 34% contained at the moment. A CAL FIRE captain says the fire did slow down a little bit this past weekend, but the weather could accelerate burning this week.
The sun's hitting us, temperatures are going up, relative humidity is decreasing, and now it's becoming a little bit more drier, a little bit more ready to burn. So our crews are out there working hard.
CAL FIRE says the fire is expected to continue to challenge crews until more favorable conditions arrive later in the week. And taking a look at your money, Wall Street rallying to bounce back from its worst day in nearly 2 years. Stocks jumping today. The Dow rose nearly 300 points. The S&P advanced about 1%, and the Nasdaq also gained a percentage point. Wall Street recovering the losses after yesterday saw a nearly 1,000-point drop in the Dow, which led to calls for an emergency rate cut. The Fed announced last week that rates would remain the same, though there is potential of a cut next month. Tonight, the Middle East and the U.S. remain on edge, bracing for a potential Iranian attack on Israel. The Biden administration is trying to limit the scale of any attack, which Iran says would be in retaliation for the killing of a senior Hamas leader in Tehran. U.S. officials say escalating the conflict could jeopardize efforts to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza.
We are engaged in intense diplomacy, pretty much round the clock, with a very simple message. All parties must refrain from escalation.
This as the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah claims to have launched a fresh round of attack drones and missile strikes at Israeli targets. Hezbollah, both a military arm and a political faction in Lebanon, said today that it was just getting started and that a separate response to the Israeli assassination of a Hezbollah commander in Beirut last week had not yet come. Israeli officials say 7 people were hospitalized from those strikes, 1 in critical condition. And tonight we are learning more about Monday's attack on U.S. personnel in Iraq that injured 7. A defense official confirming that 5 U.S. service members and 2 U.S. contractors were hurt in the rocket attack at Al Asad Air Base. The injured personnel are receiving care at the air base, and 2 have been evacuated for further care. All 7, the defense official says, are in stable condition. The Defense Department has blamed Iran-aligned militia groups for the attack, calling it, quote, dangerous escalation. Over in Paris, the United States has surpassed China for the most gold medals won so far in the Olympics. Gabby Thomas winning the women's 200-meter dash for the U.S.'s 23rd gold. They finished the day with 24. Also today, the women's soccer team defeated Germany to play in the gold medal match on Saturday. Pretty incredible. We're so proud of them. Well, toxic forever chemicals known as PFAS, they have already invaded our food supply and water supply, now being uncovered in pesticides sprayed on millions of acres of U.S. land. Spotlight on America's Lisa Fletcher has been reporting on PFAS for years and its ties to cancer and other health issues. Now she investigates the new concern and growing calls for the government to act.
4 letters you're probably hearing more than ever before. PFAS. It's the short name for a class of thousands of chemicals linked to several types of cancer and reproductive and developmental issues. They've been found in countless everyday items, outerwear, cosmetics, food packaging, even drinking water. Now, new evidence places PFAS at the center of another environmental investigation, in pesticides, sprayed throughout our communities, threatening even more exposures in our food and water supply.
Pesticides are just some of the most widely used chemicals in the world. This is the first comprehensive review of PFAS and pesticides in the U.S.
Alexis Temkin is a senior toxicologist at the Environmental Working Group and one of the authors of the study.
There's still a lot more that needs to be done. Like, for example, understanding just pesticides might be a way that PFAS get into our water and potential drinking water system.
According to the report, among pesticide ingredients approved in the last decade, nearly a third of them were classified as PFAS chemicals.
This trend of having more pesticide products approved in recent years that meet this definition of PFAS, I find it really surprising because at the same time, we were also learning about how harmful it might be, is something that's kind of hard to reconcile.
The harms are well documented, especially for PFOA, one of the most studied PFAS chemicals, found repeatedly in pesticide products by leading environmental groups.
We've seen with a lot of these legacy PFAS associations with the reduced effectiveness of vaccines in kids. We've seen increases in cholesterol, impacts on pregnancy like hypertension or adverse birth effects like reduced birth weight. So there are really a myriad of health effects from PFAS exposure.
It's why there's new pressure on the EPA to act. This year, the agency set limits on PFAS in drinking water, acknowledging the public health risk of the chemicals. But when it comes to pesticides, there's a blind spot. In the current approval process, manufacturers are not required to disclose all of their ingredients or provide safety data about them.
That leaves a huge window of vulnerability and data gap for the public.
What more does the EPA need to do to really address this problem?
All PFAS pesticides need to have immunotoxicity testing. I mean, that's how pesticides are registered, is through EPA approval, and they really have a responsibility to ensure that the products that are being used are safe for public health.
Temkin's review also recommends that the government expand monitoring programs for PFAS in pesticides to understand the potential impacts to human health. Next step, the research goes to the EPA and key members of Congress, where researchers hope that their recommendations will be embraced. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Lisa, thank you. And coming up, intended consequences, what led a once profitable gun store in California to close up shop. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter most to you, from a new plan to clean up homeless encampments in Tennessee to a man facing charges after chaos on a flight from Washington State. We're taking the pulse of America, but we begin with a gun shop owner who says the laws and policies in California are forcing him to close down for good.
In June was the first month that we didn't make money. Then July and the taxes hit and we lost even more money.
Farrell says because of new laws in California, firearm stores are required to have $1 million liability insurance policy and add an additional 11% tax for customers.
So a $500 gun now costs about $650 out the door, which is huge.
And get more cameras.
So we had to invest about $10,000 to $12,000 on the video and audio surveillance system that the state of California requires for the gun shops. So that was a big hit for us.
With all the additional costs, Farrell says he just can't afford it anymore.
Another well-known homeless encampment shut down in Hermitage. This after years of community complaints. And after at least 4 camps have been shut down through the city's phase plan, now community advocates want to see Old Tent City addressed next.
How are you guys?
Barry Dupnick, who's been cleaning up the homeless encampments across the city for years, says Old Tent City is the biggest in the Tri-County area, calling on immediate action.
I've been down there for about 2.5 years, trying to, clean and help people get out of that situation. But it is a massive camp, so there's a lot of drug use.
Right now, the Office of Homeless Services won't disclose what camps will be addressed next, but their prioritization team will base it off vulnerability, people, location, and environment.
Video shows flight staff trying to control a screaming man locked in the bathroom aboard an American Airlines flight between Seattle and Dallas in mid-July. That man is identified in a federal grand jury indictment filed Wednesday as 26-year-old Eric Gapko of New Jersey. Documents saying he allegedly assaulted and intimidated a flight attendant, tried to open the aircraft exterior doors multiple times mid-flight, vaped on board, and bothered other passengers. Passengers apparently take matters into their own hands, helping flight crew tie up his hands and feet while the flight diverts to Salt Lake City.
You say potato, I say potato.
Where video shows Salt Lake City police escorting Gapko off and to jail.
Well, tonight, the Chicago White Sox could break a record that has stood for 36 years. The team lost its 21st straight game last night, tying the 1988 Baltimore Orioles for the most consecutive losses. Chicago plays in Oakland tonight and could set a new low for the American League. But the modern-day Major League record would still be held by the National League's Philadelphia Phillies with a 23-game losing streak back in 1961. And that does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more reaction to the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.